If there were tens of thousands of people here building the pyramids, where's their settlement?
A long corridor inside the last of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing, the Great Pyramid of Giza.
For generations, we've credited the ancient Egyptians with building this colossal wonder from the ground up. But what if that story is only half true? What if these awe-inspiring monuments were already here, and the Egyptians merely claimed them as their own? Today we dive into bold theories, reveal stunning new evidence, and challenge everything you thought you knew about one of the world's greatest wonders.
A new discovery inside the Great Pyramid of Giza.
In my opinion, is the most important discovery on the 21st century.
The hidden entrance and depths of the Great Pyramid. Over 4,500 years ago, Khufu ruled Egypt's 4th dynasty, and his pyramid still towers over the Giza plateau today. But back then, it didn't look like the weathered steps we see now. The whole thing was covered in smooth, bright white Tura limestone, polished so perfectly that it reflected sunlight like a giant mirror. Every seam, doorway, and hidden feature was buried under that casing, making it look like one perfect wedge of stone with no way in. Over time, that outer layer was stripped away, leaving the rough core we see now. But knowing it was once a seamless, sealed monument is key to understanding its mystery. For centuries, nobody could see an obvious entrance. The real doorway is on the north face, high above the ground, about 56 feet up and roughly 26 feet east of the middle. Back when the smooth casing was in place, it blended in so perfectly that you could stand right in front of it and never notice. Ancient writings claimed there was a hidden block you could move to get inside, but by medieval times, that secret was long lost. All people knew was that it was sealed tight, which made the darkness inside even more intriguing.
You know, in the 9th century, the Great Pyramid still had its facing stones in place, but there was an Arab caliph, Caliph al-Ma'mun, who had already realized that other pyramids did have their entrances in the north face. Nobody knew where the entrance to the Great Pyramid was. But he figured it.
The most famous story about breaking in takes us to the year 820 CE, when the Abbasid Caliph al-Ma'mun came searching for treasure and secrets.
Accounts of the earliest tomb robbery, which is in the 9th century, when Caliph Ma'mun and his gang actually smashed their way into the Great Pyramid with sledgehammers, and they found nothing inside it.
His men started digging into the north face about 23 feet above the base, tunneling straight into the softer limestone. Legend says they heard a loud crack, the sound of a hidden stone plug shifting, and followed that noise until they reached the original passage. Historians still argue over how true that part is, but the tunnel they made is real. Tourists still walk through this robber's tunnel today before joining the ancient corridors. From the true entrance, the first stretch inside is surprisingly small. The descending passage slopes down at about 26.5 degrees. It's just under 4 feet high and about 3.5 feet wide, so most people have to stoop, and backpacks can scrape the walls. This narrow path cuts through the pyramid's core and keeps going into the bedrock below, forming a straight path the ancient Egyptians believed led to the underworld. Walking down it feels like a slow slide into silence. After more than 300 feet, the cut stone gives way to natural limestone. Near the end, it flattens into a short crawl space that opens into a room carved right into the rock. The subterranean chamber, also called the pit.
And I think the heart of that structure is the subterranean chamber, which is 100 feet vertically beneath the base of the Great Pyramid.
It's rough and unfinished, with uneven floors and crude walls, as if work stopped halfway through. This chamber lies about 90 feet below the pyramid's base. It's around 46 feet long east to west, 27 feet wide north to south, and up to 13 feet high. Across from the entrance, a narrow corridor runs south for about 36 feet, shifts slightly, then goes another 18 feet before stopping dead in solid rock. No one knows why it ends there. Some think it was meant to be a burial chamber that was abandoned, while others see it as symbolic, representing the world beneath the earth. What's certain is that no pharaoh's body has ever been found here or anywhere else in Khufu's pyramid. On the eastern side of the floor is another mystery. a deep, man-made hole called Perring's Shaft. In the 1830s and 40s, explorers dug it deeper, hoping to find the underground lake described by the Greek historian Herodotus. They eventually reached the water table but found no hidden lakes or secret chambers. Over the years, rainwater from storms poured down the descending passage and filled it with rubble and debris. Back along the descending passage, before reaching the chamber, there's another feature, a rough vertical chute called the well shaft. It's not polished or ceremonial. It looks like a practical shortcut, hacked through softer stone to link the lower passages to the upper levels. It could have been a service route, an emergency exit, or even an escape tunnel. Whatever its purpose, it connects the deep underworld area to the higher parts of the pyramid. When you look at the whole lower system, one thing is clear. It was meant to be hidden and difficult to reach. The entrance was high, off-center, and buried under smooth white casing. The first passage forced anyone inside to stoop for a long walk into solid bedrock, only to end in a rough, echoing chamber with a dead-end tunnel and a deep pit. Even the well shaft looks like it was made in a hurry. It's as if the builders wanted this place to feel raw, ancient, and close to the earth itself, while keeping it almost invisible from the outside. There are no ancient inscriptions explaining why it was built this way. That lack of answers is part of what makes this hidden lower system so fascinating. And this is just the beginning. Next, we'll leave the dark, silent depths and climb toward the blocked passages and engineering marvels that form the true heart of Khufu's pyramid. Climbing to the heart of the Great Pyramid. Halfway along that narrow, sloping corridor inside the Great Pyramid, something changes. The smooth path that had been leading steadily downward suddenly takes an unexpected turn upward. This wasn't an accident. It was hidden on purpose. When the pyramid was first built, the lower end of this upward passage was sealed shut with massive granite blocks. Early explorers found about 15 feet of it still completely filled with these heavy red granite plugs. The slope of this hidden passage matched the downward one almost exactly, about 26.5 degrees, showing that it was part of a precise design, not a random change in direction. Once you get past the section with the granite plugs, the space opens up into one of the most spectacular sights in any pyramid, the Grand Gallery. Picture a steep stone ramp, about half the length of a football field, stretching from 153 to 154 feet long and rising to almost 29 feet high. Down the middle runs a narrow ramp only about 3.4 feet wide. On either side of it are continuous stone ledges, like long benches, each cut with dozens of rectangular slots. The walls don't go straight up. They step inward in 7 layers, one above the other, creating a tall, narrowing shape. The ceiling above is another example of smart engineering. The roof slabs are tilted slightly more steeply than the floor and locked into place with notches, so their weight presses into the side walls rather than straight down. This clever trick helps prevent the roof from cracking under its own weight. Those ledges and slots were not decoration. In the late 1800s, the famous surveyor Flinders Petrie measured them carefully. He noticed a repeating long-short pattern in their spacing, as well as small ratchet-like cuts in the roof joints. No one knows for sure what they once held, but their precision suggests they were used for some kind of controlled lifting or securing of heavy blocks. The Grand Gallery seems to have been a working space, designed for serious construction tasks inside the pyramid. About halfway up this grand hall, a small horizontal passage branches off toward the middle of the pyramid. Follow it, and you arrive in the Queen's Chamber. This room is lined with smooth white limestone and feels much smaller than the gallery, about 18.7 feet long, 17.1 feet wide, and close to 20 feet high at its tallest point. The roof is made of 2 angled slabs meeting in the middle, creating a pointed or gabled shape. On the east wall stands a tall, stepped niche, like an empty frame, but there are no carvings or inscriptions to explain its purpose. Later, modern probes would explore tiny shafts leading from this chamber. Returning to the Grand Gallery and climbing to the very top, you reach a raised stone platform, often called the Great Step. From here, the floor levels out, the walls change from pale limestone to pink granite, and you enter the most finely made space in the pyramid, the King's Chamber. This rectangular granite room measures about 34.5 feet long, 17 feet wide, and just under 19 feet high. Every surface, the floor, the walls, the massive flat roof beams, is made from pink granite brought from quarries far to the south, beyond modern-day Aswan. The craftsmanship is flawless. 5 layers of huge granite blocks on each wall, with joints so tight you can barely see them. The room has no decorations, only perfect geometry and a sense of deliberate precision. Against the west wall sits a large granite sarcophagus. its size tells us something important. It is wider than the narrowest parts of the passages leading here. This means it could not have been brought in after the pyramid was finished. Careful measurements in the 1800s proved that it must have been placed inside the chamber before the roof was put on, when the upper part of the pyramid was still open. Only then could the builders close the chamber and seal off the roots behind them. Above the king's chamber lies another remarkable feature: 5 low, flat spaces stacked one above the other, now known as Davison's chamber, Wellington's chamber, Nelson's chamber, Lady Arbuthnot's chamber, and Campbell's chamber. These are called relieving chambers, and they were the ancient builders' solution to a huge problem: how to stop the massive weight of stone above from crushing the chamber below.
You used big limestone beams, and they put them in a gabled pattern to, we think, so that the weight of the pyramid would be thrust away from this stack of chambers and from the king's chamber below.
By creating horizontal voids between layers of stone, the weight is spread out across the walls instead of pressing directly on the roof. The very top chamber even has a pointed roof, which helps divert the pressure to the sides. The granite beams that form the roof of the king's chamber are enormous. In Egyptian royal architecture, such beams can weigh many tens of tons each. Without the system of stacked voids above them, they would eventually crack under the load. These spaces were never meant to be seen. They were purely functional, a masterpiece of structural engineering. When you trace the route backward in your mind, the layout makes perfect sense. First comes the ascending passage, hidden behind granite plugs and sloping at the same angle as the downward passage. This leads to the Grand Gallery, a long, steep hall with ledges and slots that may have been used for hauling and placing heavy blocks. From there, a side corridor leads to the Queen's Chamber, a carefully finished limestone room with a pointed roof and a mysterious niche. At the top of the gallery, the Great Step leads to the King's Chamber, a perfect granite rectangle containing a sarcophagus placed before the roof was sealed. Above it, 5 stacked relieving chambers protect the roof from collapse. And that raises the biggest question of all. If so much planning and skill are obvious in the areas we can see, what else might be hidden in the parts we can't? To find out, we have to look at how modern scanning technology is now peering through the pyramid's stone layers, without moving a single block. Revealing hidden chambers with modern technology. For nearly 200 years, anyone exploring the inside of Khufu's Great Pyramid had to rely on hammers, chisels, compasses, and a lot of physical climbing. It was slow, dangerous, and sometimes damaging to the structure. But over the past decade, that's all changed. Today, researchers have tools that can see right through stone without touching it at all, like X-rays for an entire pyramid. They use particle detectors that count tiny subatomic particles called muons, which fall from space every second. They use ground-penetrating radar to spot changes in stone density. They use ultrasound to map how the giant blocks fit together. And they use cameras as thin as a pencil that can slide into cracks without moving a single stone. These don't replace archaeology. They upgrade it. And they've already revealed hidden spaces that no one even knew existed. One of the biggest breakthroughs came from muon radiography. Muons are formed high in Earth's atmosphere when cosmic rays from space hit air molecules. These muons constantly shower down and pass through everything: stone, metal, even people. Dense stone absorbs some of them, but empty spaces let more pass through. By measuring how many muons get through from different angles, researchers can spot hidden cavities inside the pyramid. In late 2017, an international team published a groundbreaking paper in Nature. They revealed a massive, unknown empty space, about 98 feet long, above the Grand Gallery. It's now called the Big Void. This was the first major internal structure discovered in the Great Pyramid since the 19th century, and it wasn't a fluke. 3 different types of muon detectors, placed in 3 separate locations, all picked it up. The purpose of the Big Void remains a mystery, but the science confirming it is solid. The same technique later revealed another hidden space, this time much closer to the pyramid's surface. In March 2023, the Scan Pyramids team announced they had found a corridor-shaped void behind the chevron-patterned blocks above the original north entrance. This space is about 30 feet long and roughly 6.5 feet by 6.5 feet in cross-section. It sits right behind the north face, just above the entrance passage. This discovery didn't rely on muons alone. The team double-checked the shape using ground-penetrating radar and ultrasound. Then, through a gap between stones, they slid in a camera on an endoscope only about 5 millimeters wide. The footage revealed a perfectly straight corridor lined with smooth limestone blocks, topped by a roof in the same chevron style visible from the outside. Most experts think it was built to relieve weight above the entrance, but the team warns that's just one possibility until more of the area is studied. What's striking is how the exploration process has changed. Nobody is breaking into walls or pulling out stones anymore. Instead, the search starts with scanning. Only if the results are compelling do researchers drill a pinhole-sized opening for a camera. This means they can map hidden spaces and even peek inside without harming the structure at all. Not every mystery inside the pyramid needs particle physics to solve. Some of the most intriguing clues come from two narrow shafts in the Queen's chamber. They're often called air shafts, but they don't actually lead outside. Instead, they slope upward and end in small, mysterious blockages. Their story began in 1872 when British engineer Wayneman Dixon examined the Queen's chamber walls and found the openings to both shafts. Inside, he discovered three objects later called the Dixon relics: a copper hook, a dolerite stone ball, and a fragment of cedar wood. That piece of cedar then disappeared from records for decades, until 2020, when staff at the University of Aberdeen discovered it had been in their collection since the 1940s. Over a century after Dixon's find, robots took the investigation further. In 1993, German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small tracked robot named Upuat 2 into the southern shaft. The shaft measures only about 8 inches by 8 inches, but the robot crawled roughly 208 feet from the chamber before its camera came to a halt at something unexpected. A smooth limestone block fitted perfectly into the shaft, with two tiny copper handles. It looked like a sealed door, not a crude blockage. In 2002, another robot, Pyramid Rover, drilled a small hole through that block and peered inside, live on television. Behind it was another limestone block just a few inches away, creating a second sealed barrier. When the team examined the northern shaft, they found a similar blocking. Stone at nearly the same distance from the chamber as in the southern one. The matching design strongly suggested a deliberate symbolic purpose. But the story didn't end there. A group called the JD team developed a flexible, snake-like probe that could bend and twist inside the shaft without scratching the stone. They sent it back up the southern shaft, through the small opening in the first door, and into the space beyond. There, it took high-resolution images showing fine red markings on the floor, possibly ancient measurement or alignment marks. The engineers from the University of Leeds who built the probe explained how difficult this was. The shaft is under 8 inches wide and runs uphill for about 200 feet. Every part of the robot had to be lightweight, precise, and able to navigate tight turns. These new images didn't solve the mystery, but they replaced years of speculation with real, hard evidence. When you connect all these findings, a pattern emerges. Muon scanning reveals large, hidden cavities like the Big Void or the North Face Corridor. Radar and ultrasound confirm the shapes. Then, a tiny camera provides the first look inside. The Big Void above the Grand Gallery followed exactly this process. Particle scans revealed it, multiple detectors confirmed it, and it passed peer review in a top scientific journal. It's tempting to imagine that the word void means treasure chamber, but the evidence doesn't support jumping to that conclusion. The Big Void could be a space built to reduce weight above the Grand Gallery, a sealed construction passage, or something we haven't even thought of. The North Face Corridor might be part of the pyramid's weight-relieving system, or linked to how the entrance was constructed. The Queen's chamber shafts were clearly designed with intent, but why they were blocked remains an open question. Two important lessons come from all of this. First, the Great Pyramid still holds more secrets than the spaces we can walk through. Second, modern physics and robotics can uncover those secrets without causing damage. That's why each new image and measurement must be compared with everything we already know about how the ancient builders worked, their engineering, their symbolic designs, and their construction methods. In the next part of the story, we'll step outside the pyramid itself and explore the world that kept it alive. Life around the pyramid. Step outside Khufu's Great Pyramid, and you quickly realize Giza is much more than a pile of stone blocks. Just to the south, something incredible happened in 1954. Workers clearing the area uncovered two long boat-shaped pits. When they opened the first one, they found more than 1,000 pieces of ancient timber, carefully stacked like parts in a giant do-it-yourself kit that had been waiting for over 4,600 years. Egyptian archaeologist Kamal el-Malak immediately understood they had found a royal treasure, a full-size wooden ship from Khufu's time. Egypt's chief restorer, Ahmed Youssef Mustafa, then spent years patiently piecing it back together, plank by plank. When finished, the ship was stunning, about 142 feet long from bow to stern and nearly 19.5 feet wide. It was built mostly from imported Lebanon cedar, joined without a single metal nail. This was not a model, it was a real seaworthy vessel, one of the finest surviving wooden ships from the ancient world. For decades, the restored ship was displayed in a small museum next to the pyramid. Then, in 2021, to protect it from humidity and decay, the entire vessel was carefully moved to the new Grand Egyptian Museum, where it now rests in a climate-controlled hall. Next to this first pit was a second, still-sealed boat pit. For years, experts left it untouched, knowing that once opened, the fragile timbers would need immediate, expensive care. That chance came through a partnership with Japan. In 2013, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, gave $2 million to fund the excavation and conservation of the second boat. 8 years later, in 2021, JICA pledged another $3 million to finish restoring it so it could join the first ship on display at the Grand Egyptian Museum. This was slow, careful work. Testing, documenting, lifting, and stabilizing each piece, because any rush could destroy it. Why were these ships buried here? Ancient Egyptian belief tells of the sun god sailing across the sky by day and through the underworld by night. Many scholars think these were Khufu's solar boats to carry him on that same journey in the afterlife. Others suggest they were used in his funeral procession along the Nile. The first ship's perfect joinery, rope lashings, and lack of a mast still leave room for debate. But whatever their purpose, their place beside the pyramid ties Khufu's burial directly to the idea of travel, across water, through time, and into eternity. If you walk east of the pyramid, you reach a different kind of story, the people who made all this possible. In the early 1990s, archaeologists uncovered tombs belonging to men and women who worked on the Giza monuments. These were not mass graves of abused slaves. They were simple but respectful burials, often with jars of bread and beer placed beside the dead for the afterlife. This discovery shattered the old Hollywood image of slaves building the pyramids. Instead, it confirmed what many Egyptologists had argued. The pyramids were built by organized crews of Egyptian laborers, who were paid, fed, and proud of their work. Excavations even revealed a rotation system. Teams served in shifts of about 3 months, then returned home. Just southeast of the Sphinx are the remains of their settlement. This site, called Hayt el Ghurab, the Wall of the Crow, is named after a massive stone gateway that still stands. Starting in the late 1980s, archaeologists with Ancient Egypt Research Associates began uncovering a planned workers' town covering over 17 acres. It had long barracks-like galleries, large bakeries, and administrative buildings. Piles of animal bones, bread molds, and broken beer jars showed that this was not a temporary camp. It was a fully organized, state-run base built to keep the pyramid projects moving. The diet here was impressive. Analysis of the bones shows the workers ate mostly cattle, sheep, and goats. Based on the bone counts and the calorie demands of heavy labor, researchers estimate the crews consumed around 4,000 pounds of meat every single day. That's about 2 tons daily. Only a centralized, well-funded administration could have kept that food supply going. Written records and excavated kitchen areas confirm the rest of the menu. Massive amounts of bread and plenty of beer, given out in standard rations. This was the diet of skilled laborers, not starving captives. Even the burials back this up. Some skeletons show well-healed fractures, meaning injured workers were treated and allowed to recover. Others show evidence of surgery. These people weren't disposable. They were valued, trained laborers who received care when needed. Giza wasn't just a construction site, it was also a royal stage. In 1925, northeast of Khufu's pyramid, a Harvard-Boston expedition led by George Reisner found a deep shaft, now called G7000X. At the bottom, about 90 feet down, lay the burial goods of Queen Hetepheres I, Khufu's mother. Her chamber was filled with treasures, a bed with a canopy, a throne, a carrying chair, cosmetic boxes, and fine vessels. But her body was missing, and even her alabaster sarcophagus was empty. Scholars still debate what happened. One theory is that she was originally buried at Dashur, but after her tomb there was robbed, her treasures were moved to Giza, without her mummy. Whatever the truth, the discovery gave us a rare, intimate look at the luxury of Egypt's 4th dynasty court. On the east side of Khufu's pyramid stood his mortuary temple, linked to a valley temple near the Nile by a raised stone causeway. The valley temple now lies buried under the modern village, but parts of the mortuary temple remain. Archaeologists have found fragments of a large courtyard lined with red granite pillars and limestone walls decorated with scenes from Khufu's 30th year Sed festival, a jubilee that renewed a pharaoh's rule. The temple was not a storage hall, it was a sacred stage for daily rituals. Priests brought trays of bread and beer here, not for themselves, but to feed the king's spirit, so it remained strong forever. South of the main pyramids stands a monument that puzzled visitors for centuries, a stepped block of bedrock covered in fine limestone, later enlarged into what looks like a small pyramid. Early travelers thought it was a fourth pyramid of Giza. Today, we know it as the tomb of Queen Khentkaus I, probably the daughter of Menkaure and either the mother or wife of later kings. Her tomb has two building stages and mixes the design of a mastaba and a pyramid. It sits on a carved island of bedrock, faced in gleaming white Tura stone, with its own small settlement and cult center to keep her memory alive. In silhouette, it really does resemble a pyramid, which explains how it got its old nickname. When you put all these discoveries together, Giza changes completely in your mind. It's not just 3 giant pyramids and the Sphinx, it's a whole living system. This was a place of movement and life. River traffic brought cedar wood, food, and stone. Shipbuilders crafted massive vessels without nails. Cooks and brewers fed the crews. Masons cut, hauled, and set blocks with precision. Priests performed rituals in courtyards of granite and limestone. Families buried their loved ones with bread and beer. The scale was enormous, but it was all held together by one idea, that even in death, a king must keep traveling, must keep ruling, must keep moving forward. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.